In memory of Jean Biswas, the photo depicts a man in his 50s, smiling at the camera. Jessica realizes that she has made a mistake. She wasn't supposed to attend a funeral. This is not her uncle's funeral. It belongs to someone else. She looks around but doesn't see any familiar faces. It wouldn't have been any different if she had attended her uncle's funeral. There's no point. She scans the crowd again, but no one seems to notice her. That's a good thing. But it doesn't help with her social anxiety. She fears someone might approach her and engage in small talk. What would she say if they asked her who Jean Biswas was to her? A stranger? Lost in thought, someone brushes against her shoulder and mutters a quick sorry. She tries to say no problem, but it comes out as a whisper. She spots a bench a little way off from the actual funeral, where a woman and an old man sit in silence. Jessica decides to sit with them, thinking it's the best way to avoid the crowd. None of it matters now. She'll spend her time on this bench under the quiet tree. Perhaps her uncle's funeral is taking place somewhere nearby, but she has no desire to be there. It was her mother who insisted she take a flight from London to attend the funeral in Kolkata. Jessica thinks about her uncle's lifeless body. In her mind, it's still and cold, just like when he was alive. Cold and always trying to impose certain rules on others with his so-called critical mind. Jessica, you can't laugh too much. It's a sign of immaturity. Jessica, why don't you have any friends? Don't hang out with those girls. They'll ruin your future, and I'm not paying for anything. But the cruelest thing he ever said to her was, if your father were alive today, he wouldn't be pleased to see how you turned out to be a worthless human being. Is she truly worthless? All she did in her life was rejected by her uncle at every turn. She couldn't please him, and eventually she stopped trying. But her mother didn't stop trying. Jessica knows her mother only felt burdened by her uncle's financial support. She wished her father were alive, as she had many times in her life. She was very young when her father died, leaving her and her mother alone. Her uncle took on all the expenses, which seemed like a genuine offer of a helping hand reaching out in the dark. Later, it became the suffocating walls of a dark room. In that moment, Jessica feels strangely happy. She's glad her uncle has passed away. Even though he was very old in his final days, those eyes of disappointment never dimmed. There were so many times when she wanted to gouge out those eyes. When she moved to London after receiving a job offer, she thought she was free from all this, but her uncle's questions never ceased. Even though he wasn't providing any money, he always made them feel as though there was a moral debt that needed to be repaid. Although he couldn't control her life anymore, just the thought of trying made Jessica sick. She remembers how her uncle died of a heart blockage, and a smile appeared on her face that night after hearing the news. So, she'd rather spend her time here among these strangers than go to her own people, who are no less than strangers. Her phone rang, shattering the silence in the room. All eyes turned to her as she quickly pressed the silence button, her heart beating heavily in her chest. She mouthed an apology and nodded, trying to blend back into the background. Taking a deep breath, she looked down at her phone, seeing that it was her mother calling. Her mom was probably wondering why she hadn't arrived at the funeral yet. She decided not to answer the call, remembering the argument they had about attending her uncle's funeral. She didn't want to deal with another argument, not now. Mothers, always causing embarrassment unintentionally. A woman's voice whispered beside her. Jessica looked over and saw a woman in her 30s. She smiled a little, although she felt like it was inappropriate given the somber atmosphere. She hoped the conversation would end there, but the woman extended her hand towards her. "I'm Anvi." Jessica took her hand and shook it gently. "I'm Jessica." "It's nice to meet you." "Jessica," Anvi said, although her eyes were looking straight ahead. Jessica noticed that Anvi was strikingly beautiful, maybe a little older than her. Then came the question that Jessica had been dreading. Who was John to you? Jessica thought for a moment, remembering the pictures she had seen of John earlier. He was wearing a suit like he worked in an office. She took a chance and said, We worked together. I didn't know him well, though. But I'm really sorry for your loss. Oh, I'm his wife, by the way. Jessica turned to look at Anvi again. She didn't look like she would be John's wife. She looked too young. Why was she sitting so far away from the family? So many questions started forming in Jessica's mind, but she was also afraid that Anvi would catch her lie. I'm sorry. I didn't know that, Jessica said, feeling guilty. That's fine. Most of his colleagues don't know me. Our marriage was new, you see. Jessica didn't know how to continue the conversation. She was always bad at making small talk, but she was relieved that her lie wasn't a bad one. Anvi continued, It was a love marriage. You know how they say love has no boundaries. It's quite true for us. Even though he was double my age, we somehow connected. That's great, Jessica said, and then immediately regretted it. I mean, that's great that you two found love in each other, but I'm also deeply sorry that you didn't get to spend much time with him. There was no response from Anvi, and Jessica thought she had said the wrong thing. How did he die? Jessica asked, realizing her mistake. Overdose of sleeping pills. He had sleeping problems. Yeah, he did. Some nights, he couldn't sleep, and I would sing him songs and tell him stories to help him relax. Wow, you really loved him, Jessica said, feeling a pang of sadness for Anvi. I did love him. I loved him at his worst. You know, people say I married him because of his money, which is not true. I married him because I loved being the only source of happiness to him. Jessica didn't say anything. She thought Anvi was telling her too much. But then she was in a worse place, so Jessica didn't mind listening to her. But you know there wasn't always love. Of course. Which relationship is perfect anyway? We fought too. We had arguments. There were days when we hated each other, but all was fine because I was the only one in his life. After some moments of silence, when it started bothering Jessica, she said, Was there a moment when you thought of leaving him? She didn't know why she asked that, but she did. Never. Jessica nodded. Jessica, have you ever thought of killing someone? Jessica looked at Anvi, but her eyes were still and cold, and for the first time, she realized that Anvi, who claimed to be the wife of a dead person whom she loved, had no grief in her eyes. She didn't look a bit sad. Answer me, Jessica, she said in a soft voice, and for the first time, she looked Jessica in the eyes. This time, Jessica looked away from her. She thought of the cafe manager who misbehaved with her for no reason. She thought of the man on the subway who used to sit beside her just to brush his hands against Jessica's leg and make it seem like an innocent mistake. She thought of Rebecca, the girl who was more outgoing than her and eventually stole her sweetheart Kevin from her. But mostly, she thought of her uncle, who ruined most of her life and made her the way she is. Distant, cold, nervous, socially awkward. Such a pathetic waste of life I am. If your father were alive today, he wouldn't be pleased to see how you turned up to be a worthless human being. She thought about that knife she used to carry when she was little, always thinking that if her uncle hurt her feelings for once, she would dig that knife deep in his chest and end things there. But she never got the courage to do so. She thought of her uncle's dead body and the things she would have sacrificed just to dig that little knife into his chest for once. No, I never thought of killing someone. I had moments when I was really angry, but I never thought of taking someone's life. Why are you lying, Jessica? We all have thoughts of killing someone at least once. Some people control the urge, and some people can't, Anvi said. Jessica's forehead furrowed. She wanted to ask her how she could be so sure, but she asked something else. Did you ever think of killing someone? Almost without skipping a beat, Anvi said, Yes. Whom? Many people. Jessica didn't say anything. But mostly my husband John. I thought you loved him. Who says I didn't? Then, I wanted to kill him too. Jessica looked around. Some people were looking their way. One person waved toward Anvi, and Anvi smiled a little. There was no one who could listen to their conversation. The old man beside Anvi was long gone. But why? Because he was cheating on me. What made you think that? I'm not stupid, Jessica. I knew he was fucking chicks half of his age. Then why didn't you leave him? Leave him? Why would I leave him? He was the one who broke his vow. I vowed to stay with him forever. But that's toxic. So what did you do? Just ignore him? Live in denial? I killed him. Jessica couldn't believe her ears. She knew something was wrong. She felt like this was all staged, a staged prank, and she felt anger rising in her. What bullshit. Do you really think I will believe that? I don't care if you believe me or not. Why are you telling me this? You don't even know me. Just felt like it. What a joke. Jessica muttered under her breath. You know, that night, I didn't have any arguments with him, which was rare. I lay on my bed in a dark room and thought how outrageous this was. Not him cheating on me, but him thinking I wouldn't get it. Am I that stupid? Does he think that just because I live a luxurious lifestyle because of him, I would ignore his infidelity? I always kept myself busy with work, pretended like I didn't see that lipstick stain on his shirt, pretended like I never heard those messages on the phone, pretended that he didn't lie to me about a bunch of things, pretended that I didn't see him at that cafe, putting his hands over a girl and shoving his head in the curve of her neck. All I was doing was pretending. I couldn't take it anymore, so I went to the kitchen and made myself a cup of coffee and thought about the way I could kill my husband. There were so many ways, but I had to do it in a way that no one would ever doubt me. Then I remembered about the sleeping pills which he takes every day and how the number keeps increasing every day. How strange. You know, fucking those women couldn't give him a good sleep. Everyone knew about his obsession with sleeping pills, so I didn't have to explain anything to anyone. Why do you think I will not tell this to the police? Anvi laughed a little, then said, I still remember his face. After taking that glass of milk, he said, Thank you, I will sleep better. Look how he is sleeping. Anvi motioned her hand towards the graveyard. So peaceful. Jessica was now clear that the woman who sat beside her had lost her sanity, and indeed she was confessing her crime to her. She couldn't take it anymore. She abruptly stood up and looked at Anvi, who was looking at her. I have to go now. My mom will be worried about me. I told her that I would come back before evening. Your story was funny. I get pranked a lot. I guess I got pranked today too. By the way, nice to meet you. Sure. Likewise, Anvi smiled. Jessica stormed up from the place, hitting several people on the way, so she kept saying sorry under her breath. Once she was out of that place, she thought about what just happened. Should she believe what she said? Or was it indeed a stupid joke? Why didn't anyone call her once if she was his wife? There was no solid evidence that the things she was saying were true. But something told her that she was telling the truth. After some minutes of walking in a deserted lane, Jessica came to the conclusion that it was a stupid prank, and she fell for it. She was angry and felt like punching that pretty woman in the face for making a fool out of her. She looked at her phone and saw several missed calls from her mother, and a few from her workplace. The clock said it was 5:45 p.m., and the sun was starting to set in the west, from in between the trees. The road she was walking on was covered in fallen leaves, and on each side of it there were big trees covering the whole sky. This place in Kolkata was mainly used for grave lands. 2 sides of the road were graveyards. Jessica enjoyed the light breeze through her hair and thought about what she would tell her mom. In that moment, she heard someone's footsteps behind her. When she looked behind her, there was Anvi in a black dress, tied-up hair, and a little smile on her face, which seemed so innocent, but looked evil at the same time. "What are you doing here?" "You forgot this." She showed Jessica her handbag, which most probably she left on that bench when she ran from there. Jessica took the handbag from her hand. "Thank you, and sorry you had to come all this way to return this." "No problem," Anvi said in a soft voice. Okay then, see you again sometimes," Jessica said with a smile and started walking. After walking some steps, she looked back again, and Anvi was still standing on that spot, looking at her blankly. "That wasn't a lie. You were the one who told me a lie, Jessica." "What?" "You said you were John's colleague, but he didn't work in any office. He had his own business, which he stopped doing for the last 2 years. Look, I'm sorry. I was here for my uncle's funeral, but somehow I ended up in your husband's funeral. It was a dumb mistake." "But it wasn't a dumb mistake on my side. It was all a plan." "What do you mean?"
Next morning, "Jessica, come here and look at what they're showing in the news." "Coming, Mom." Jessica's mother increases the volume, and Jessica can hear the reporter saying, "There was a body found in the south side of Kolkata, near the graveyard. It's the body of a woman in her 32nd who was attending her husband's funeral. Her relatives say they last saw her at 5:40 leaving the funeral, saying she needed some fresh air, and she never returned. When they searched for her, they found her body on the road and called the police. The cause of death appears to be excessive blood loss. A cutting mark was found on her neck, which is believed to have been made with a dull knife. According to records, her name is Anvi Biswas. We will keep you updated on this murder case." Jessica looks at the sink, red blood mixing with water, looking like wine flowing into the sink and then disappearing. Jessica cleans the knife and touches the point of the knife with her fingertip. Who said it's dull? She thinks. Beside the sink, there's a diary which reads, "It's November 2013. I killed the cafe manager. She wasn't even looking at me when I put that poison in her coffee. She took my order with that grumpy face and then said, 'Your order will be ready in a moment,' with that annoying voice. I think about how her dead body would look, cold as she was when she was alive. It's July 2015. I killed that man on the subway. It wasn't too tough to get a date with him. After the boring date, I confirmed that he's a serial woman harasser, and as anticipated, he took me to a dark alley and started touching me without my consent. I pulled out the knife and slit his throat. He was dead. I took his money and gold chain, so it would look like a robbery. The usual robbery that always happens in this big city like London. It's February 2016. I killed Rebecca, that bitch. She thought she could steal other people's man and get away with it. I put poison in her drugs. No one will doubt anyone. It's just another drug addict dying from an overdose. At least there's one less shitty person in this world. It's May 2017. Uncle is dead. Mom called me today and said he died of hot blockage. I wish it was me who killed him. I wanted to see him die in front of my eyes. I wanted to see his eyes that were always disappointed in me. They would have grown in size with amusement when I put that knife through his body. I wanted him to see my eyes, which were more disappointed in him than his were in me. Jessica dries her hands and takes a pen, then stops writing on a new page. It's May 2017. I killed Anvi Biswas. What a woman she was. She surprised me. She talked just like I think. It was like listening to my own brain speaking to me. Am I that stupid? I remember her words. That's how I feel. Am I that worthless that you can get away with hurting me? No. Everything has a consequence, and the people I killed deserved it. I didn't want to kill Anvi, but she attacked me because I was the one who knew her secret. But it's a shame she couldn't see herself in me like I did in her. We all have thoughts of killing someone at least once. Some people can control the urge, and some people can't.